Welcome to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.
When the paranormal finally is seen as normal, where will it take us? Will parapsychology lead the human race into the future? Are we finally beginning to connect the dots?
Well, hey there, and welcome to the 145th edition Behind the Paranormal.
154th.
154th.
Easy mistake.
You know what? Just whatever. Alright, so edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. And on our Monday drive time show on WOON 1240 AM. And it's Monday, alright?
Okay.
It's Monday, and this is WOON 1240 AM and www.onworldwide.com. I'm Ben, and those questions were pretty important. And they were asked by my partner in the paranormal, my dad.
You're doing fine, Ben. But before we welcome tonight's guest, it's contest time.
Yeah, once again, from last week's question, whose ghost did Winston Churchill reportedly see while staying at the White House? And the answer was Nancy Bissett from Norton, Massachusetts got the answer. And the answer was Abraham Lincoln.
Okay.
You know what? I'll get it eventually. Just give me the time.
Fine.
Just give me the time, and I'll get it.
That's all right. This week's question is: in what American lake does Normie supposedly live? Normie. Okay.
All right. If you can handle that, call us locally at 401-766-1240, or from anywhere in the U.S. at 800-449-1240. If I don't announce the winner during the show and you still think you have a shot, drop a line to me at benditbehindtheparanormal.com. And the winner gets a copy of Aliens Above, Ghosts Below by tonight's guest.
And now to our guest, Dr. Barry E. Taff, who holds a doctorate in psychophysiology, is a world-renowned parapsychologist who worked as a research associate at the UCLA's former parapsychology laboratory from 1969 through 1978. During his 40-year career, Dr. Taff has investigated more than 4,500 cases of ghosts, hauntings, poltergeists, and conducted extensive studies in telepathy and precognition, eventually developing the initial protocols and methodologies for what was later termed remote viewing. He was himself examined as a psychic subject, and the results published in the journal Behavioral it must be a contagious thing. Behavioral Neuropsychiatry.
It's Monday.
And it is, in 1974 and 1975. At least we're not stuck in traffic like most of the listeners are.
Oh, yeah.
One of the cases Dr. Taff investigated in 1974 gained international fame as the book and 1983 movie The Entity, starring Barbara Hershey and Ron Silver. Dr. Taff served as technical advisor on the film, as well as being represented by the character Gene Kraft. Dr. Taff has appeared on numerous national and international television and radio programs, including CBS News, Unsolved Mysteries, The Joan Rivers Show, A Current Affair, Hard Copy, NBC's The Other Side, Haunted History, Mysteries and Scandals, and many, many more. And now he's rounded out his career by appearing on Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. He's consulted for government, business, law enforcement, including the CIA, ONI, NASA, and many of those other alphabet soup places. He's worked on many Hollywood scripts and has written numerous articles for magazines and journals. Has been featured in many books on paranormal subjects, ranging from precognition to UFOs. His own book, Aliens Above, Ghosts Below, Explorations of the Unknown, has just been published by Cosmic Pantheon Press. And his website, or a website, about where you can find out about the book, of course, www.cosmicpantheon.com.
Dr. Barry Taft, welcome to Behind the Paranormal.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Okay, and our call-in numbers today, before we get to our questions, are nationally 800-449-1240 or locally at 401-766-1240. Dr. Taff, I've really been looking forward to this show because it's a great honor to have you with us. You and I don't know each other, I'm sorry to say, but even though we've been working in the paranormal field for roughly the same amount of time, though you're certainly far better known than I am, to say the least, our academic backgrounds are somewhat different, but we seem to have come to some of the same ultimate conclusions, so I'm looking forward to comparing ideas and experiences tonight. And Ben will start us off.
Good.
All right, so What were your basic ideas about the paranormal when you started in the 1960s, and how have they changed since then?
Well, what got me into this field is twofold. One is scientific curiosity. I read lots of books on the subject matter, books by Frank Edwards many, many decades ago, Stranger Than Science, Stranger Than Strange.
I started with him, too.
Yeah, and I read that, and then I thought, wow, I'm not as strange as I thought I was, or else I was more strange. So it was my own curiosity plus my own experiences, and it wasn't from my own experiences, I myself wouldn't believe anybody because I'm extremely skeptical. And how it all began was I met Dr. Thelma Moss through a series of events at UCLA. She was an assistant professor of psychology at UCLA, in the Neuropsychiatric Institute, and so she threw me her keys to hold in psychometry, and I started rattling off information. I'd never met the woman before. I knew nothing about her past or her present or her background, nothing. And I started throwing out information. Much of it was accurate. And the one part I heard was the name Shelley. I said a fat, blonde-haired woman with blue eyes, kind of loud-mouthed, kind of bellicose, and her best friend was Shelley Winters, the actress. Mm-hmm. So of course, I didn't know. I knew of, but I didn't know that was her friend. And so that initial meeting with Dr. Moss, I became a research assistant, and she tested me as a psychic, 41 years ago. It was published in the mid-'70s, as you read. And my interest was, why was I having these experiences while others were not? Why not my friends? Why not my family? Why me? And so we started doing work in the lab, and I said, well, theoretically, you might be able to train people to do this if they learned what it felt like to get accurate information from inaccurate information. Maybe they could develop a learning paradigm, learning protocol, and you could enhance it. We started doing that. And that was the stuff in the lab, and that got really interesting. But the stuff that really held me was the field work, investigating cases of hauntings and poltergeists, and things of that nature. And unfortunately, the chance of running into anything substantial in any case is like it's like winning the lottery 4 or 5 times in a row.
Yeah.
You go there, you interview the people at great length, you ask a lot of very relevant questions, very personal, probing questions about their background emotionally, their background medically, chemically, whatever, and then their genetic background, take measurements in the environment, and you're hoping that something may happen when you're there, which is extremely unlikely. But once in a while, you're in the right place at the right time, and whatever it is seemingly responds to your presence or reacts when you're there, and that makes up for all the dead time.
Yeah, I find that you have to take a lot of time in order to experience anything in that sense. I think you're absolutely right. Your entity case, as it were, took place in 1974, and one of my big ones took place in 74 too, and that was the Bridgeport, Connecticut case of that November, where I was with Ed and Lorraine Warren, and it took. I always feel that there's a little bit of the chemical mix is changed when someone else comes in, especially when they come in with several people. And it took 12 hours, which isn't very long, I suppose, in this, as cases go, but it took 12 to 15 hours for things to really start happening. And by the time of the second day it rolled around, everything was, the circus had returned. So I see what you mean. I'm sorry to interrupt, so please continue.
But what's interesting is, am I hearing my own voice coming back at me? Is that feedback?
No, we're not getting it here.
If I can hear Mom speaking, and I'm hearing my own voice coming back at me very loudly.
Unless you're in the Boston, Providence, Worcester area and have your radio on.
No, I'm in Los Angeles.
Okay, so. I don't think it quite reaches from there.
Right.
Anyway, sound good here. Sounds real good here.
Okay,
yeah.
Anyway, we've discovered things that would have, if you told me this 20, 30, 40 years ago, I would have laughed and said, you people need to see a psychiatrist.
Me too.
The events seem to be the result of a confluence, not an influence. It's not the whole idea of a haunting and ghost may be kind of, I guess, old. That it seems to be a relationship between the location and the individual. And if the location is unique enough in terms of its geomagnetic or electromagnetic signature, and the individual has the predisposed neurophysiology requisite for this, they couple in a way that isn't totally understood, and the result is phenomena.
Yeah, I'm with you.
And my book gets into this ad nauseum, and I hate to say this, but it's getting a little boring now because every case appears to be like the one before it. The people may be different, but the types of events, the locations, the environments, the measurements we're seeing appear to be the same all the time. And that's what it's like. I don't care how much you like your favorite food, you don't want to eat it for dinner every night or for lunch every day.
There was a point where I found cases starting to get boilerplate, okay? But then the more time we spent on them, especially when Ben started working with me a few years ago, and they started leading into other areas of the and we base our work entirely on the multiverse theory. Now, I'm prepared to admit, and we have many guests, and we exchange many ideas, and you learn a lot. So that's the great thing about hosting a show like this. And you find that maybe some worlds, as it were, if you believe that sort of thing, have spirit worlds and stuff attached to them. But I find the whole thing is very physical. In the Bridgeport case, I often cite the example of when I was standing with the little girl who was apparently the parapsychology of the time, the agent, if you might say.
Right, poltergeist.
Yeah,
right.
And it was something I don't really believe anymore. But the thing, one of them, there were four, you could see gauzy structures coming, and one kind of got around me. It bumped into me, and I could feel bone structure. I said, what the heck is this? This isn't a spirit, So anyway, these particular things happened to me, but and got me into this other thinking. But certainly, the importance of the ingredient, as it were, of the participants, the residents or whatever, is absolutely critical. So I'm with you all the way on that.
The thing that's most intriguing from my perspective as a scientist is we measure these strong geomagnetic or electromagnetic signatures. And then the people frequently are either seizure-prone or epileptic. And it can be as subtle as having sleep disorders. And the medication they take is a anticonvulsant. And, gee, they get, I would stop taking the meds. Suddenly do the seizures come back, and I can't sleep. But the phenomena starts to occur again. But see, what's interesting, the majority of the people I've been looked at, their cases, tend to be seizure-prone or epileptic, but the majority of people who are seizure-prone or epileptic aren't poltergeist agents. So somewhere in the middle, there's a missing or unknown variable.
Yeah.
And we don't know what that is yet. It could be the emotion, the unstable emotion.
Yeah.
But we've also found something that's even more intriguing. Okay? Measuring a human bioelectric field is easy. A lot of ways to do that. But biomagnetic is extremely difficult and costly. You need superconducting coils. It's very difficult. Well, we have a lot of instruments we take out in investigations, and some of them are redundant. And so we get a reading on one and want to see if we get a correlation on another. And when we encounter these people plagued with this physical phenomena, their bodies appear to be emitting millions of times the strength of a normal body in terms of their magnetic field. And this, not only should it not happen, it can.
Yeah. Well, see, this is where we. And again, my background is in theology, philosophy, and psychology. Not psychophysiology as you are, which is why it's an interesting comparison. But we don't use. I don't anymore use a lot of gadgets. I kind of feel, I've convinced myself of what I need to know, in my opinion, and I'm open to everybody's ideas. But I don't take a lot of gadgets anymore, especially when you find out that everybody uses EMF meters. Those can be influenced by radar arrays. 8, 10
by your
miles.
cell phone will make it go off.
Sure, absolutely. So I take it with a pillar of salt. But the unknown ingredient, in our opinion, based, of course, on experience rather than classroom knowledge, I suppose, is that we're dealing with parallel worlds. I mean, we've gotten photographs of what appear to be boundaries and different rooms on either side. I mean, that to me, and a lot of physicists get, Fred Alan Wolf, we had him on the show, and he got a little frustrated at first, but then he said, I see what you mean, because there's no way to prove it. So I don't know. So I don't know whether that's where you're coming from. I don't know. But
it's a little more than that. Well, apparently, again, after 41 years of work in this field, the common thing appears to be the unique neurophysiology of the individual. And what I'm saying in the book is that we, the living people, act as amplifiers. In electronics, they're called operational amplifiers. I'm calling us biological operational amplifiers, BOAs, basically. And we serve, not only we take what's there and bump it up, but we seem to orient it or mediate it with our unconscious. So we're the antenna, the amplifier, and the waveguide. That's
the perfect lead into my next. Ben's got questions too, but I'm fascinated here by. the physical nature of the. I think there's much more physicality involved in the paranormal than most of the garden variety spiritualists, sort of, who are most prominent in this field, would have us believe. And I'm fascinated by the fact that your degree is your specialty is in the, as it were, the physical roots of paranormal phenomena. Is that, am I putting that?
Psychophysiology is an interdisciplinary degree. It's the interrelationship of the brain to the body to behavior.
Mm-hmm.
So it's it's medicine, but from a functional standpoint, not one of diagnosis and prescription.
So I notice you do. Ben's going to ask about mediums and psychics, but you do at times seem to, should I say, step across the line into the spiritualistic. Is that correct to say?
Decades ago, yes.
Yeah.
Right now all I can tell you is this. In the book, for example, I go into case after case after case, and you're going to see the commonalities over and over.
Yeah.
Are these unique individuals, or the chemistry between two people will trigger something while one will not?
Sure.
It appears what's really interesting is that when you see objects, let's say a 220-pound man or a heavy piece of furniture being thrown around the room like it weighs a few milligrams,
mm-hmm.
not even that, and the room that doesn't even get warm but gets colder, that's telling us something about what's going on, and it contradicts everything we know about the physical world. Because in the physical world, what we know of it, everything that does work produces heat as a byproduct, the second law of thermodynamics. This does not. And because of that, if we learn what this force is, we're able to access it and put it to use, the world will change forever in a very, very positive way. It could free us up in a way we can't even begin to imagine right now.
That's what I want to get into, as you say, leading us into the future. And I do apologize. I did not have time to read the book. I wanted to, but, time being what it is.
Right.
So, Ben, go ahead and...
All right, so moving on. When you started working in this field, did you start working with psychics and mediums and stuff? Or when did you start working with them?
No, I was tested as a psychic back 41 years ago, and that was kind of boring. I could do it at certain things, big deal. I should say my abilities seem to be very heavily focused in two areas. One is I'm a medical intuitive, and I have this problem or ability or gift since I was a child, and I thought it was normal until I almost got kicked out of school for it and caused problems with friends and families. And the last real girlfriend I had, I couldn't see anymore because she was getting sick. Before she knew it, I felt it. I couldn't be around her.
Wow.
So what?
I've never met well, to me, a true medium is actually a rare, because I've never met personally a person I believe can talk to the dead. There's an old line from the X-Files where Mulder is saying to Scully, he said, we can talk to God all day, we call that prayer, but when God or the dead talk back, you're schizophrenic. And I've used that line in dozens of shows on TV, and no one will air it.
Yeah.
Because I believe I've seen no evidence, in my opinion, that proves people can talk to the dead. Whatever this stuff is, it can display itself to us in a myriad of ways. But I've seen that as far as communication, the information appears to be fragmented, almost dissociative, and it's not linear. It's like random access. And that's the way most paranormal processing works. If it was, so that's my opinion. I've met lots of people who call themselves mediums, and I'm not impressed. Mm-hmm. They're half-baked or burned, but they're not a medium.
I've seen no evidence. Yeah, I've seen no evidence. I've seen no evidence that there were any dead. Period.
All right, so that answers the question that you don't take them seriously, I'm assuming.
Well, I haven't invested a lot of energy or time after a point, because I found a lot of disturbed people who were full of themselves or trying to take advantage of gullible, naive individuals to give them money. But I've never found. I've seen incredible phenomena in front of me. But as far as proving that a person could just have a communication with the dead like we're having now with each other, I haven't seen any evidence for that.
Mm-hmm.
The beginning of psychical research in England in 1882, that was the whole rage, and yet, there's just always an alternative explanation that more fits the given event.
Mm-hmm.
And in science, Occam's razor, all things being equal, you go with the simplest explanation. So before you jump to the conclusion that you're talking to dead people, you got to rule everything else out.
Let me throw this at you and see what you think. Now, again, I've been working in this, again, maybe from a different point of view, for 40 years. I started when I was in the seminary studying with a priesthood, and it got me in all kinds of hot water. And I think there is one case in all those years in which I felt what is commonly known as the cold spot, or that sort of energy change for the negative. I don't know why. Everybody talks about it. I've stood, in that Bridgeport case, I stood with the cops and watched the refrigerator float around the kitchen and stuff like that. And I was hit by chairs and all this. I've been injured on several occasions. Never, except at that one old farmhouse in Glastonbury, Connecticut in 1975, did I ever feel that cold spot. Isn't that kind of strange? I mean, why? I've never quite figured that out. Everybody else talks about the cold.
First of all, the cold spot may be very subjective. Apparently, when the magnetic environment changes in such a way to affect a certain person's neurophysiology, it produces something called piloerection, where the hair follicles, because of the way it's stimulating your nerves, stand up and you think you're cold, or air is moving when there isn't. We have recorded drops in temperature that correlate to jumps in magnetic fields. We had a case from 05 to 06 here in Beverly Hills, and I went there a total of 16 times over a year. I got sick 16 times I went there. It's in one of the chapters in my book. I touch upon the case. It was in Benedict Canyon, and it was the chapter which I speak is chapter 7, called An Irreplaceable Loss, the life and death of a poltergeist agent. And it turns out this is an honest-to-God geomagnetic anomaly site, and no one knows why. The U.S. Geological Survey acknowledged it. I passed out there the first time I went there. I passed out the last, and I said, I can't go back here anymore because it was making me sick. 2/3 of the people that went there fell ill. Objects thrown at us, cold spots, disembodied voices, luminous anomalies. But as far as documenting the nature of it as to who or what, we knew why, because there were horrible murders up the block 41 years ago there. And then there's a geomagnetic anomaly. So it's like you have everything in the same place at the same time. It's like, again, this confluence, not an influence, a confluence. And we know the symptoms experienced by many of the people that were at this location, including myself, are indicative of sensitivity to strong electromagnetic fields.
Yeah, well, that happens to us. I mean, we've been in it. We both feel the whole father-son thing here started with an experiment on my part a number of years ago to see whether blood relatives had the same reactions, the same stimuli in these particular areas. And sure enough, it seems as though the closer the blood relationship, the more the reaction is similar. At least in our family, anyway. Maybe we're like the Adams family, the paranormal here.
I mean, it could be the same. The way your guys are built internally, the way your nervous system is organized, may be so similar that this is why you're sensitive to it. And we had people come into these environments and they go, I don't feel it. One of my old friends, he's been very ill most of his life. He has Crohn's disease and fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, and he's about 15 years younger than me. So he was there, and I was worried he'd get really sick. He said, I don't feel anything. What's wrong with you people? There's nothing here. We have very advanced instruments. We have geomagnetometers, not EMS meters. These are devices that cost thousands of dollars. Low-frequency spectrum analyzers, and they went nuts in this particular environment in Benedict Canyon. And yet you take them a few hundred yards away, and they're fine. And UCLA Geophysics went up there, and they said, this place is really magnetic. I said, we know that.
Yeah.
Why? Well, they don't do any more mapping on the ground. It's all done for aero mapping, from aircraft or satellites. But the question is, isn't it odd that these locations have this unique physical environment? And why is it that some people are sensitive to it and others are not? And my guess, if people travel the world, go to famous haunted locations anywhere. Some people run into phenomena, others do not. And my guess is the reason this is because some people are wired as the antenna and they're sensitive, others are not. And I discuss this ad infinitum in the book. The first section has 7 chapters dealing with ghosts and hauntings and poltergeists and apparitions. The second section is correlated to, it's called UFOs, EVEs, and abductions. We found that we've had a number of cases that began as a poltergeist situation and evolved into either a CE3 or an abduction, a CE4. Or we reversed, began as an abduction, then had paranormal fallout. And in chapter 10, a girl I was almost engaged to suffered a horrible trauma because we were together, and that she never recovered. We probably would have been married within less than a year at the most. And we got along. I met her on a case, actually, and she was abducted while we were together. They didn't take me, but they took her, and she never recovered.
Wow. We're going to take a commercial break right now, and we'll be right back on Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno and Dr. Barry Taff. Stay with us.
New River Press is proud to sponsor tonight's segment of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Benjamin Eno. New River Press offers the best in unusual New Age books. Stand by the side of tonight's host, Paul Eno, as he battles poltergeists and helps suffering souls and families in the critically acclaimed books Faces at the Window and Footsteps in the Attic. Plunge deeper into the paranormal with Paul and learn about its influence on human history, its action in our daily lives, and its ultimate meaning for us in the best-selling Turning Home, God, Ghosts, and Human Destiny. Available now from New River Press, publishers of unusual books. Visit newriverpress.com, amazon.com, or your favorite bookstore. And set for release late this year in one of the most unusual books on the subject ever written, Paul gives us Dancing Past the Graveyard, What Ghosts Have to Say About God.
And we're back Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno here on WOON 1240 AM in New England's beautiful Blackstone Valley, and online at www.onworldwide.com. And our guest this evening is Dr. Barry Taff, renowned parapsychologist. And we're talking about all sorts of things regarding the paranormal, what's behind it. And we're going to go on into some subjects that are going to lead us into the future, perhaps, here. But first, I wanted to ask Dr. Taff about the work of Dr. Michael Persinger. Now, he was on our show not too long ago, and we were perfectly prepared to blow him out of the water, but he really impressed us very much with his God helmet. It had been like that.
Oh, yeah, that was interesting.
Yeah. So what do you think of the work of Dr. Michael Persinger, who was able to stimulate things like near-death experiences in the laboratory, that sort of thing?
I've read a lot of his work over the last 30-plus years, and his work is quite impressive. Very commendable scientific work. It's good replicability. However, it's important. We have to understand one thing. Just because we can simulate something does not mean the real event doesn't occur. That's
absolutely what we told him. Yep,
right, and this is important. Just because we can make a movie about going to the moon does not mean we never went.
Mm-hmm.
Again, because you can make people think they're having an out-of-body experience, or they're being abducted, or they feel like there's someone watching them, doesn't mean that things like that don't occur. That's absurd. His work is important because it shows that very subtle levels of energy have dramatic and sometimes profound effects on our perception and behavior and performance. However, if they were so demonstrable that they could influence us as readily and dramatic as he implies at a regular basis, we would be pretty much dysfunctional in terms of driving or flying or doing anything. We'd be vegetables.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, some people are more susceptible than others. It is related in my book. I mention him because, in fact, I mentioned him in the chapter 2 on the entity case because it's very relevant. But again, I have to point out to those people that know what he's saying, what he isn't saying, is that it doesn't readily explain everything that goes on. Again, it's an alternative explanation once you rule everything else out. And that is one of the last things we have to rule out. Is this nothing more? In other words, the way of describing this, in the entity case, okay, we had 25 people in a little tiny bedroom in Culver City, California here in the summer of 1974. It was very hot. We all saw the same lights coalesce in a corner, producing a large apparition. And the chapter in my book goes into this in detail. And yet we couldn't photograph what we saw. We had, 8 or 9 cameras. We got balls of light. We got weird arcs, which you'll see in the book. The pictures are there. But we couldn't photograph it. So that begs the question, did we see it with our eyes, meaning photons are being emitted and hitting the retina and the optic nerve go to our brain, or are we sensing it with our brain? If it's the latter, there's no way on earth we can photograph it as far as we know.
Yeah.
You can't photograph dreams yet. But again, in reality, there's no such thing as a mass hallucination. There's mass hysteria, but not a mass hallucination. If you had 30 people in a room and you made all of them hallucinate simultaneously, the chance of more than one of them or two having the same hallucination, you 1 in a trillion. It just doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
Because the chemicals are different enough in terms of quantity and specificity from each person to the next that you won't get it. So what did we experience in the entity? one possibility was that we were sensing or perceiving this energy in a way to influence us, but why did we all see the same thing? And we can't answer it. The woman we believe is deceased. She died, according to her son, who we haven't spoken to, but on the internet he said that she died in 95. We don't know that for sure. That's what he said, but we don't know it. But in other cases, where sometimes an apparition is seen by some and yet not by all, which doesn't make any sense. In the article, the chapter on the entity, chapter 2, goes into detail. I mean, it covers every alternative. And once you rule out the possible, then the impossible, whatever's left has to be possible. It's sort of what Sherlock Holmes used to say.
Right.
And the bottom line here is, for the first time in 128 years, we're flying below the waterline on the iceberg here. We're getting to see the enormity and the complexity of what's going on.
Exactly.
And it's far more complex than we ever imagined. We are much more unique and utterly complicated and diverse than we've ever thought. And the bottom line might be that the concept of birth and death might be an illusion, as we know it, and that consciousness may exist before we inhabit this body, may exist afterwards, and therefore time and space are only relevant when we're in the body.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, I've come to the same conclusion from a different direction many years ago.
And, when we did the work with remote viewing and telepathy and the precognition, which I discussed in the book in part, the evidence, again, suggests that the past information still exists. The future's information already exists. And meaning the information is equally distributed, which means, like a hologram, all of the information of all of time and all of space may be contained in all of time and all of space. So you can access something in your car that could be happening 1,000 years ago or 1,000 years from now. And if this is true, it implies a reality far different than what we were taught to believe by science and religion.
Yeah, that's true. Well, we long ago came to the conclusion that ghost hunting, quote unquote, a term that I detest. It's not what it is. You're time traveling. You're mind traveling. You're dealing with people from other times and the implications for spirituality, even for the study of history, are absolutely incredible. Ben, go ahead. You're going to ask
very important question. Yes. So, what's your opinion of the current state of pop paranormal research, ghost hunting, and all that?
4 letters: CRAP.
Absolute. Well put.
Put it this way: the shows that are on right now, to me, are a joke.
Yeah.
I won't go into any. I don't want to go and attack any one show. They're all pretty much the same.
Yeah.
I was approached by one of the early shows early on to get involved by the creator, and he told me what he was going to do. He said, well, since most of the time nothing happens, we're going to fake it, and then when it does happen, we're going to make it look like a hoax. I go, well, nice knowing you. And that was it. I walked away.
Yeah, that's happened to me 3 times with 3 different producers.
And they called me from another group. This was for Ghost Hunters Academy, whatever it was. This was a couple years ago. And so I said, they wanted me to be a mentor to the kids. I go, a mentor in what?
Oh, I could ask the same. Yeah, they asked me the same thing.
Yeah, and they said to me, well, I said, well, is the mentor like in the physical sciences, like physics or chemistry or electronics or engineering? No. Medical sciences, neurology, biology, anatomy? No. The social sciences, psychology, behavioral sciences? No. What? Well, how to chase demons? I go, don't bother. Then I said, just for the sake of discussion, what kind of money you? Well, we're not going to pay you.
What?
You're not going to, you mean, so I run around yeah, you'll be on TV. I go, goodbye. When you wake up, give me a call.
Yeah, right.
And I think they're appealing to the lowest common denominator, which is always stupidity and ignorance.
Absolutely.
And the shows, they did a real disservice. They took one of my cases that was on and aired July of 07. They shot it in the fall of 06. This is the one in Benedict Canyon, Beverly Hills. Mm-hmm. And it's this extraordinary case, and they turned it into a joke.
Unbelievable.
And I went on the internet, I logged in, and I said, look, I know what I think of the series. It's not worth my time to even compare it.
Yeah.
But I said, this case is real. This is the reason many of us have devoted our lives to studying this, because this may change everything in a very positive way if we listen and look at what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And, I know this is going to sound absurd, but in the book I talk about the fact that the energy, the force that's making these things happen, physical phenomena, accessing things through space and time, I believe we can tap this with electromechanically without accessing it through our minds. It could free us from coal, from oil, from nuclear, from geothermal, from hydroelectric. It could allow us to travel anywhere on Earth in under an hour, to grow food anywhere, to heal things more rapidly and efficiently. And it doesn't seem that the powers that be have an interest because we're doing fine the way we are. Who cares if we get rid of oil and
I
gas?
don't know about that.
Coal? I won't. In the book, I go into story after story about the resistance of new technology replacing old. And anyway, in the book, I talk about something called zero-point energy.
Mm-hmm.
And my guess is, from what I've studied and investigated, this may be the force behind all of it.
Yeah, but that's very possible. Well, the reason I say I don't know about that is because we air a lot of shows on similar subjects. Now, I'm interested, too, in the implications of the paranormal for our self-understanding, of our understanding of how the universe is constructed, or the multiverse, whatever you want to call it, and take it from that perspective. But it certainly includes everything you've said. And we get a lot of very strange reactions when we talk about, especially my theory or our theory, that the government or somebody is well aware of this, the idea of how to use these various energies and forces, such as you described. And Dr. David Deutsch at Oxford University is talking about the same thing. And all sorts of strange things happen to us when we talk about that on the air. Not all the time, but we've had people, strange people coming to the door, and maybe it's because, I don't know, maybe we live in a lousy neighborhood or something, I don't know, but it's
Perhaps.
it's too coincidental.
Well,
Threats.
let me tell you this. I gave my first lecture on the zero-point connection about 5 years or 6 years ago here in L.A., had a good response to it, I thought. And a few months later, I get a call from a friend of mine, and this person used to work for the DOD, now the person works for the DOE. So they said to me, look, as long as you keep this about the paranormal, no one's going to care. But if you start saying if you can commercialize it, develop it, she goes, stop it. I go, why? She goes, well, the last few years, 5 people were assassinated, executed, shot point blank back of their head. All of them were trying to develop zero-point technology.
Oh, that's nice.
And I said, the thing is, even if I had the money, I couldn't do it because you couldn't get the components. They're only used in high-energy weapons or directed energy weapons research.
Yeah.
You try to order the stuff, you forget it. They'll be at your door with guns drawn.
That makes a lot of sense. I've never been a conspiracy theorist. People go nuts with that sort of thing. But
yeah.
Then again, you see and hear these things, and when it starts to happen to you, it's a little different. So,
but I think it's even simpler than we think. A story, for example, the guy who invented television, a guy named by the name of Philo T. Farnsworth, he was working in the field, plowing for his dad, or the tractor or whatever, a hoe, and suddenly he had an idea, this is in the early 20th century, of how to send not words through the air, but how to send pictures through the air. So he went, now he had no background in science or technology whatsoever. He developed it, he brought it to David Sarnoff at RCA, and David Sarnoff took it, and there was television. Philo never got a penny.
Yeah.
It's everyone who's tried to develop and commercialize Nikola Tesla's work has been stopped because they're threatened that it's patent violation.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that isn't the answer, because that would have electrified the Earth's atmosphere, would have ionized us and killed us. So that wouldn't work either. There's a great deal of logic in keeping things the way they are, because if you have trillions of dollars wrapped up in power technology and everyone's making money doing it, why would you want to change it? You see what I'm saying? If they put ourselves in their shoes, we don't need internal combustion engines. We can tap 0 point, have electric motors that drive all of our vehicles. We can go from coast to coast in 30 minutes without polluting the atmosphere or heating it by combusting chemical fuels anymore. But who cares? Let's keep doing it. I brought a propulsion technology to a few aerospace engineers companies back some time ago, and they knew what we were doing, and they said, how old are you? And I told them, and they said, they knew about it, and they said, you won't live to see it occur. They said, why? He says, well, no one wants this yet. When we run out of fuel, they'll say, let's start doing it.
Mm.
Everyone is the people that control these things are very happy the way things are going, except the people in the Gulf, and this could be a very disturbing trend where this stuff starts to bite us back, really bad.
Yeah.
And we should have started, look, the Nazis in World War II, they had synthetic fuel development, and of course they didn't go anywhere because we destroyed their infrastructure. There's a couple of good books that you might want to read on alternative energy that was being developed during World War II that never went anywhere. One is called The Hunt for Zero Point by Nick Cook, and there's a couple other books, but it's amazing what's been done that few people read about or know about. And I just have the feeling that we're looking a gift ghost in the mouth. Instead of figuring out what's going on and how, they want to know who. Forget the who. Once we know how, what, and how, the who will be obvious. So will the why.
Can you say anything else about how parapsychology might lead us into the future?
Well, imagine a way to slow the aging process down, to a dramatic, like there's something called electromedicine. I have 6 medical patents, some of which deal with this. And there's been tremendous resistance to getting funding. And these devices aren't paranormal, but my work in parapsychology led me into this area. And you would not believe the resistance of the pharmaceutical companies, mainstream medical groups to touching this. Who cares? Imagine, if God forbid you break a bone, okay? You're in a cast for weeks to months. How horrible that is. Your arms stiff, your legs stiff, whatever. Imagine they put you in a cast with an induction coil. You're healed in a few days.
Mm-hmm. Like a salamander.
Yeah, exactly. Dr. Robert O. Becker, who wrote several books. One was called The Body Electric.
Yeah, I read it. That's why I knew about the salamanders.
And he couldn't get funding on it. No one cared.
Nope.
What about regeneration of mammalian limbs? Not talking about amphibians. I'm talking about mammals. Becker did it. Mm-hmm. No one cared.
Yeah.
Don't bother us.
And he started working in the early 60s, or even before that. Yeah.
Exactly. And unfortunately, he died. He was an old man.
Mm-hmm.
And he couldn't get funding, and now we're finding the same thing. I'm trying to sell a car to a caveman here.
Exactly.
It's just like, let's go back further in time. You know what happened in Fatima in Portugal in 1917?
Not offhand, no.
There was a movie made called The Miracle of Our Lady of Fatima. A lot of
course.
3 children saw these things come down from heaven. They thought they were angels or, whatever. And the evidence now, reevaluated it with modern perspective, strongly hints at the possibility that what happened was more ufological related than angelic or theological. We're being manipulated at a very subtle level.
That's an interesting subject.
And what's intriguing, the 2 of the kids closest to it, they died not that long later of what they thought was consumption. They did an autopsy many decades later, and you know what killed them?
Not radiation poisoning.
Radiation poisoning.
You've got to be kidding me. I never knew that.
Yeah, well, most people, but the church doesn't want to talk about that because that rules out religion, doesn't it?
Well, I know that firsthand because I got thrown out of the seminary for being involved in the paranormal 2 years before.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so see, we're all talking about the same thing. The question is what we call it.
Yeah.
Remember, if 2,000 years ago you saw a person being picked up in a shaft of light into a round silver cloud, that was an ascension.
Mm-hmm.
If it happens today, we call it an abduction. Is there any different? Maybe not.
Yeah. Interesting idea. Yeah,
the
absolutely.
question of where we are in terms of our technological evolution and our understanding of things, that'll determine how we perceive things and what we call it. And my book goes into this, in great detail. The evidence is that some of the beings visiting us on this planet may have created us. That we might have, the term of intelligent design, right?
Yeah, we've gotten into that. Yeah.
Well, it may be a true term, except God may have nothing to do with it. That we very likely may have been designed, but not by God, by another race of beings that in and themselves may not have been human.
Well, there's a certain point of view that maybe whoever did it messed it up, too.
Well, or it's still ongoing and it's still an experiment. I go into this really heavily in Chapter 8 and Chapter 10 of my book.
Subjects for future shows, certainly. And you're going to be with us on CBS in a couple of weeks, and we're going to look forward to continuing that. I want to continue, of course, but before we run out of time, we tend to do that because we get so absorbed in the conversation. The book is Aliens Above, Ghosts Below. Tell us where people can get it.
Okay. You go to www.cosmicpantheon.com, and you can. It's the newest book put out by them. You just click and order it. You'll get it in probably a couple days.
Great. Okay. All right. So let's continue. We got a few more minutes here. Ben, did you have something you want to ask?
No, it's you got this.
We're on a roll here. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I don't want to interrupt your guys' conversation.
Not a Kaiser roll either, right? I mean, you realize that in World War I and the trench warfare in the European theater, the Germans and French were killing each other, and they saw these apparitions descend of the, Mother, Madonna, and they all freaked out, dropped their weapons, and ran.
Yeah, we talked about that in our 4th of July show.
Yeah, it was
patriotic, paranormal thing.
And what's interesting is people don't even know this happened.
No.
So let's say whoever did this, let's see what these little furry creatures do with their fire sticks. If we show them an image they think is godlike. Oh my God, they all run.
Well, the trouble with wartime, especially apparitions of that kind, was they were propagandized and or made up, so that it's difficult to research.
Well, when you have thousands of people describing the same event from two sides of a battle, the chance of it being invented is pretty small. When people are traumatized, their reason they're traumatized, and there've been it's like in Fatima, there were several good books published recently about what happened there, and again, we're finally in the place where we can objectively evaluate what these things might have been.
Mm-hmm.
And the suggestion is that something has been influencing human evolution from the get-go, including our existence. In the book, in chapter 8 of my book, I talk about an image that was in Omni magazine in 1980 called the Dinosauroid. What dinosaurs would have evolved into had they not been wiped out by the asteroid hitting the Earth back in
reptilians.
Well, what they would have turned into looked exactly like what people describe as aliens.
Yeah.
Exactly, not similar.
Mm-hmm.
They're identical. And I thought, what if that's exactly what they are?
My goodness, what are we getting into? Yeah.
And again, the correlation between these events, that these things coming to Earth since the dawn of civilization, going back into pre-biblical times, they're using forces that we call paranormal the way we use electromagnetism.
Mm-hmm. Ben's bringing us back down to Earth here with a question. You want me to read it? Or?
Yeah, sure, go for it.
All right. How many? And maybe this is because we spend so much time on cases. How many years did it take to work on 3,500 poltergeist cases?
Actually, 4,500.
4,500. All poltergeist
cases? Right.
Okay.
No, I mean, most of the cases, I'd say 90, 95, 98% are poltergeist. They related to the people. Most cases begin and end on one event. Go out there, you interview the people. It never happens enough to warrant our return. It's very rare that a case evolves beyond the initial interview, or the people there are things going on, but they need psychiatric intervention more than our help.
Mm-hmm.
So most cases begin and end with one visit. Once in a while, you're lucky. There is the Entity case. There is San Pedro case with Barry Conrad, myself. You'll read about other cases that I've run into. One another chapter of my book is called On an All Too Human Haunting, about some poltergeist case I was involved with, a haunting in 1987, and then chapters 6 and 7, poltergeist agents, life with poltergeist agents and poltergeist agents revisited, about these weird things I've had with women I've met. And so, again, you keep logs on data, and the most astounding case was chapter 7, The Irreplaceable Lost, where Barry Conrad's last real girlfriend, she moved out here, moved in with him back in 2001. After our first case, when I went out together, within days, phenomena broke out, continued to the day she died.
Well, we're running out of time here, Doctor, but I think what we'd like to do is just if you keep on the line here, and we're going to report on a case that Ben and I have been working on in Maine. As I say, we're a little different. We work on cases for years. We run into all sorts of connections, as you obviously have too, between various kinds of paranormal phenomena. Ghosts will lead sometimes into cryptids and UFOs and things of that kind. And we hope to get into that more on our television show once we get going with that. But here's we have someone named Sal, doesn't say where he's from, has written in and asked about a case of the haunted hunting lodge in Maine. And just as a bit of background, we haven't reported on that in some time, but we've been working on it for several years, and I wanted to get your opinion on it. Now, it began in northern Maine with a hunting lodge and several of or more of a hunting lodge resort. There were several buildings, one of which seemed to have a lot of poltergeist activity. The people moved out of the area, the people being the managers, and they worked for the particular company that owned several resorts, and they moved to another resort in southern Maine, where they called Ben and I, because they thought they had read apparently my book Footsteps in the Attic, which has to do with the multiversal nature, in our opinion, of what this is, and they said, well, this is pretty much explains this, but they were followed by what we refer to as a parasite, a negative entity, which, in my opinion, is attracted by the agent in a poltergeist case, and at least in my experience, they are life forms, not necessarily produced entirely by the agent, but that's another story. So anyway, this is what seems to be happening in this case, and this has followed them. I suspect it might have be attached to the family of the woman, the wife in the case. She is of Native American descent. Not necessarily that means anything, but I mean there seems to be a certain connection. There are all sorts of events. For example, we were in there one night, Ben and I, and we turned on the infrared camera in the basement. And as soon as we left the basement, somebody else apparently arrived. The washing machine went on, footsteps all over the place. That normal activity for someone else, apparently. And this is just one of the things. So there is an update on this case. And this is from Bernice there, who was the wife in the case. And it says, lots has happened here. We just live with it, the most recent being that I saw a woman about a week ago crossing the living room from the TV to the chair in a long old-time dress with her hair all tucked up under a bonnet, which looked like the kind that was worn to bed long ago. She then disappeared. This wasn't bad, but on June 27th, I got up at 3:48 a.m. and went out to the couch, and because her husband snores, and my puppy followed me out. So I decided to take her out to go potty, and when I came back in, it was 4 a.m. I put a couple blankets on the couch so she could get up on it with me, and we lay down. I then heard 4 light knocks, at which I thought was the front door. My first thought was one of the seasonals was out there. That's the people visiting the resort. Was out very early and saw me and thought I was up. I laid there waiting to see if the doorbell would ring. I figured that would be what they would do. Instead, another 4 knocks again, very lightly, and still I stayed there waiting for the bell. This went on every few minutes, about 15 minutes or so, and normally I would have gotten up. Then I heard 2 very loud cracks. I say cracks because that's what I can think of to let you know what the sounds were like. I was very scared. I was going into the bedroom to wake up Larry, that's her husband, but then I heard footsteps on the cellar stairs. And this went on and on and on. It turns out it was not the back door. It was the cellar door, et cetera, et cetera. This is the sort of daily life in this house. What's your opinion from your experience on what's going on here? I mean, we've run into all kinds of things in this
well,
case.
first of all, I mean, the type of things you're describing are extremely common.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they are. Yeah.
And a lot of our cases, the people move into a new environment. They have no experience prior to it. Things start happening. They leave. It stays with them. But new people coming into the environment have it as well, which suggests that it's like a contagion. You know, let's say you're healthy, you go or visit your friend's house. You don't touch them. You don't breathe in there. But you come home and you give it to your family. We know what that is. That's the contagion. There may be something the same here, but it isn't viral or bacterial. It may be energy. The environment alters the individual in some way that makes them act as the emitter, and they leave and they keep emitting it, and eventually it bleeds off and it stops. But my guess is if we were to bring instruments in there and measure the environment and the people, we'd see a relationship. And this is what's getting intriguing. It's not the same some of the time. It's the same all the time.
I'm afraid,
now, we don't understand what it means, except that these people act as the antenna. They absorb it and they re-radiate it.
Well, I'm afraid we're going to have to stop here. I hate to do it, but we're flat out of time. Dr. Barry Taff, thank you for being with us, and we'll look forward to a couple of weeks. You'll be with us on CBS.
My pleasure.
And check BehindTheParanormal.com for our schedules, and we'll be talking to Dr. Taff again very soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Okay, so many thanks to our producer, Craig Pelletier the Great, and we'll see you next week, Monday, July 19th, right here on ON 1240 AM and www.onworldwide.com at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 Pacific, when we will welcome author C.L. Talmadge for a look at where we are, paranormally speaking, before we're born.
That sounds pretty interesting.
Yeah.
All right, so on our regular Sunday show on July 18th, 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 Pacific, on CBS Radio in Boston, Detroit, and Seattle, and online at www.newskyradio.com and at www.parax.com. We'll take a look at paranormal adventures in Europe with our friend, but not relative, Shane Eno of the Paranormal Institute of Denmark.
And again, check out our show website, BehindTheParanormal.com. Local radio schedules for CBS stations carry the show. Websites where you can hear us from anywhere. And you can always get podcasts of all shows, of course, at BehindTheParanormal.com.
All right, so in the meantime, we will leave you with a quote from American novelist Dean Koontz. Koontz?
Yeah.
Okay, Koontz. Houses are not haunted, we are haunted. Well,
okay, we got a
little time.
No, we don't.
No, we don't. All right, so see you next week.
Okay.
Return to this radio frequency 167 hours from now for another edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.